Hello friends and welcome back to my channel. We've got another book review today. This time it is Beyond Pain, The Anthropology of Body Suspensions. And nobody asked me how much money it cost me to finally get a physical copy of this book. We're not going to talk about that. We're not going to ask about that. We're not going to think about that. But I finally have my hands on a copy of this. I remember maybe back in like 2018, seeing Frederica posting in some of the body suspension pages on Facebook about this Anthropology project and thinking that it sounded incredibly cool, and I was incredibly excited to find out more about it. And I remember the post when she completed it. The cover is stunning and just stuck with me so much. And now I have a copy in my hands, and I'm really excited about this one. I'm really excited about this one, y'all. This is a look at the anthropology of modern body suspensions with a focus on Europe. And I didn't know exactly what to expect going into it. I'd read a little bit about the project on Facebook, but whenever possible with these types of books, sometimes I just kind of like to go in with the unknown and like not having any expectations or any thoughts about it. And wow. This is an incredibly comprehensive piece that combines years and years of work and research and travel and communication and just a very full picture, broad spectrum look at what the body suspension community in Europe looks like and what modern body suspension looks like. And this is probably one of the best documentations on what that community looks like or looked like from the years of 2015 to 2020, 2021 that one could possibly imagine. Frederica is not someone who does suspension. She's an anthropologist who saw suspension and became moved by it and became interested in it and wanted to learn more about it and why people would do it and what we got out of it and what that looked like, and also wanted to tackle some of the misconceptions about suspension in the larger academic community. And wow, has she achieved that. Oh my goodness. So just to sort of cover very briefly the breadth of what this book talks about. There's an introduction, of course. The first chapter is a history of body suspension, and she touches on tribal roots of body suspension and indigenous roots of body suspension, but more so is focusing on suspension specifically in Europe. So touches on those subjects and where suspension comes from, looks at how that influenced modern people who then sort of brought about this resurgence of suspension and this new era of suspension in terms of like who is doing it, how they're doing it, why they're doing it, all of these things. So she overviews this history of indigenous practices, who documented them, how they were documented, how they spread, what regions they were in, and then modernly how, specifically Fakir Musafar found a book in print on a trip to Japan that depicted suspensions, particularly that of the Mandan tribe in North America, and wanted to replicate it, did so, and then images of that suspension got shared around the world, and that sort of started a jumping off point for people to want to explore this practice more. And talks about specifically in Europe, Stellark as well, and his use of the body and use of body suspension as an art form and as political commentary and as life commentary, and how these two men and their experiences and exploration of their body, coupled with these centuries old indigenous practice, combined to sort of create this modern suspension movement. The second chapter is other stories about suspensions. This one really goes into the academic community's way of pathologizing body suspension and looking at it as a self-harming practice, as well as the role of BME in body suspensions and just sort of what information and data has been written and collected about suspensions before. And she specifically tries to challenge narratives that suspension is an inherently like harmful or dangerous act. Well known as a study by Cesar Lombroso, who contributed to shaping the historical perspective of body modification in Western societies. According to him, tattoos were evidence of the mental disadvantage of those who were biologically predetermined to be criminals. In Lombroso's work, among the other elements that configured a tattoo person as a criminal, alcohol abuse and familiarity with immoral actions such as idleness, the low sensitivity to pain was an alarm bell because it made criminals similar to savages. There is an implicit message. Civilized, healthy people should abhor pain in virtue of their education, mental well-being, and ability to properly behave. If this does not happen, there is a problem, biological or social. Similarly to Lombroso, Perry interprets tattoos as evidence of dysfunction and sexual deviancy with explicit references to homosexuality. She talks further at length about the way a lot of academic literature and studies surrounding body modification tend to portray it as an act of self-harm, as a negative thing, and also looks at the way this is very much influenced by racial stereotypes and racist views, and the way academia, in an attempt to destroy certain indigenous cultures, used this perception of pain rituals and things like that to eliminate them, which was really interesting to me to read in this about suspension, because when I was reading about the Pictish people of Scotland and their body markings, commonly believed by historians to be tattoos, learning about the way the Roman Catholic Church tried to colonize these people and take control of these people and their lands and push out the way they cut their hair, the way they tattooed themselves, the way they worshipped, and their like pagan religious beliefs. I found myself with a shocking overlap of like the way modern academia discusses all of body suspension and the way the Roman Catholics discussed the rites and rituals of the lands that they conquered and they colonized, and the way that they tried to remove tattooing and body modification and body adornment as a way of homogenizing the culture and the lands. And it was very interesting parallel to me to all of that research about the Picts, and obviously like research about many other indigenous groups and the ways that their cultures were taken from them. But it's so interesting to me the way that like body modification and pain ritual are specifically things that are frequently targeted by that. She even discusses her difficulty finding a professor to take on this thesis and help her take on this project, because this was, I believe, a doctoral project that then got turned into this book, because people were so hesitant about body suspension. One of my favorite sections from that chapter is relating a hypothesis of mental illness to a practice, a powerful act of social delegitimation, as highlighted by Irving Goffman, which excludes the possibility of political neutrality. For someone interested in exploring suspension's meanings and how they are multiplying, the mental health perspective does not represent an authoritative truth. It is one among many narratives that contribute to constructing how suspensions are socially meaningful and configured in accordance with collateral actions of care addressed to the body. So after her time in suspension events and observing suspension and studying the suspension community, she finds it to be a very mindful, very conscious, very body preserving practice, and finds that the pain element of it that scares so many people and makes so many people pathologize it is honestly not the primary focus of why people do suspensions. The third chapter is the body suspension community, and it starts off with perhaps my favorite quote in the entire piece. A few times I directly asked informants what the most crucial aspects influencing a suspension were. Maybe the insertion of hooks, the pose, the managing of pain. Without hesitation, the answer was always the family. This concept not only referred to the group of people attending a suspension in person, but the symbolic collective dimension that corresponds to the emotional side of the practice. Absolutely, yes. The people present for a suspension, the vulnerability, the love, the connection, the community, that is so much more an important part of what makes a suspension a successful, effective, beautiful thing than quite literally probably any other factor of it. Like it is truly the people that really help create the magic in this. A specific quote in here from Luna and Julie, which maybe I'm definitely biased, but one of my favorite things about reading this was seeing so many quotes from people that I love and cherish and adore in this community. Luna and Julie are some of the most powerful feminine voices in modern body suspension, to whom we owe an untold debt of knowledge and wisdom too that they have provided to us over the years, and are also two incredibly powerful Indigenous practitioners who carry the wisdom of their people, said, however, Luna and Julie, among others, expand the number of significant people involved in the process beyond ancestors. The rituality, understood in terms of sacred space, is attained thanks to the presence of suspension community members who engage with and assist the performer, even if they are not Native Americans. They are the source of energy for the suspendee's spiritual labor, as well as receivers of new energy. Relationships are enhanced through mutual engagement during the suspension, the common focus of attention, and the shared symbolic meanings. Without a common significance of actions, there would not be any sense of symbolic regeneration. And there are 2 full-page quotes from Luna and Julie on the way that they take their traditional rituals and combine them into the modern suspension practice that they participate in today that give me chills and are just so beyond beautiful. And I loved seeing their voices elevated, and I loved reading what they had to say, and I love this perspective of these new rituals that are being born in the body suspension community, and the new ways that suspension is evolving and growing to help people find a way to connect with themselves, with others, with the world around them. It was very, very, very well put together. The 4th chapter is entitled The Summer, and it details our intrepid anthropologist's journey through suspension events and suscons and places where she goes to observe these rituals and watch them. And what moved me so much was the compassion and the love. It is clear that Frederica was welcomed into the suspension community and into these spaces, and really viewed this practice with a level of genuine respect and curiosity, and came to see the love and the magic in this. And it is so refreshing to see an anthropologist or a researcher come to a subject like suspension so open and so willing to learn and so able to see the thing that keeps bringing all of us back to it. From there, we move on to suspensions and suspendees online, which was a fascinating chapter for me because I obviously spend a lot of time in suspension spaces, which includes suspension spaces on the internet, and which includes having a private Instagram page where I share my suspension content and follow a lot of other facilitators and practitioners on, and pages for events where we talk about how excited we are for the coming events. Moz has been doing a daily countdown for the New Zealand retreat, and I look forward to every post update that she makes that it's coming up. And the way that Frederica really, I think, tapped into the fact that suspensions exist as the suspension as a community really exists as this like beautiful in-person place at these events and these meets and these suscons, but then really heavily exists online because practitioners are so divided by geographic barriers and living in different countries and weather and seasons and when we can facilitate and get together and when we can travel and when we can't. And it was a very good look at the way this community utilizes the internet and internet spaces and online connections to maintain a sense of community and a sense of closeness and grow relationships. Through statements on websites, images, videos, and Facebook posts, practitioners nourish what it means to experience suspensions and be a member of the community, engaging in the active creation of the online space, which is not a neutral container or flat, immobile surface on which social life takes place, unchanging and static. Rather, it is an ongoing process deeply connected to the dynamic cultural labor observed at meetings, and one which provided me with data before, during, and after them. She goes on to talk about all of the people she connected with online before events, the way the internet served her research, and the way that body suspension communities really utilize online spaces as a way to connect and a way to be around people who understand our love and our passion for this. The data indicated that suspension is more than a hobby. Rather, it is a part of one's identity because it involves emotions, relations, and experiences perceived as shapers of one's path in life. Therefore, the need to hide this interest is a cause of stress, threatening one's sense of authenticity, honesty, and continuity of the perceived self. Accusations of self-harming, insane behavior, or an incapacity for healthy self-care were commonly reported by interviewees when describing how friends and relatives reacted to their suspension interest. It is hard to experience a suspension identity in everyday life with non-practitioners, and many suspendees idealize the community, both online and offline, as an elevated space of tolerance, without misunderstandings and the need to disprove accusations of self-harm. In the suspension community, practitioners feel they can be themselves in a fully rounded way, projecting completeness and authenticity of self. And yes, absolutely, that is true. Even as someone who exists in the piercing and body mod industry, I regularly encounter piercers and tattoo artists who are horrified at the thought of suspension, and don't want to hear about it. They don't want to see about it. I worked somewhere with a tattoo artist who requested that I not post suspension content on my public facing profile because it made him uncomfortable to see it. I've had bosses tell me that I can post suspension content, but not on my public facing page or any pages associated with the studio because they didn't want to be associated with the practice, which was astonishing to me. I understand that it can be a jarring thing for people to see, so I always post my images with a content warning, but to refuse to even be associated with the practice at all is just a very interesting perspective to me. But I think Frederica did a really great job of looking at the way we use internet spaces to continue this connection and to have community where we can share these images and share these photos and share these memories and these moments without the concern of hate comments or messages or things like that. This book also took an unflinching look at negative elements of the suspension community. She talked about an unequal division of gender-based labor and the way certain roles in the suspension community rarely see women step into them, and the way sexism absolutely contributes to that in the suspension community. She looks at perceived idolization of the community as this perfect non-judgmental space, despite the fact that there are absolutely judgments and miscommunications and arguments and disagreements in the community in terms of how we do things or the way we work or things like this. She takes an unflinching look at the way existing structures of racism, sexism, and homophobia can influence even communities that label themselves as progressive, like the suspension community. And it was refreshing to see an outsider's take on these things that we as a community, I think, can acknowledge, have issue with, and are working towards being better at, but still have a long ways to go. But ultimately, I just loved her takeaway about the beauty and the power of the act of suspension. Being able to face something frightening is an achievement, as is the gradual capacity to feel like you are in control of your senses. Suspendees are not passive victims of pain. They progressively teach themselves to deal with selected sensations and to master them for the purposes of enhancement. Education comes through experience, through the observation of others, images online, posts, and other narratives, such as a t-shirt observed during the field work that depicted a reply to a frequently addressed question to suspendees. Does a suspension hurt? Of course it hurts terribly, but not only. Suspensions just open your mind to so many other things. It brings you back to your most basic instincts. Nothing can matter when you are in that moment, when you feel you can't think about your bad days or a week or what's happening at home or at work. You have to focus right on yourself, and I describe it this way. It's the only way I've found the most effective way to meet yourself, to meet your true self. And I think that I become the person who I am in part because of the things that I've done, but also because of suspension. Suspension's made me the man I am today. From Mike Coons, a dear friend and suspension facilitator here in North America. Beyond Pain is an incredible look at the modern European suspension community and the culture behind it, where these rituals came from and what they look like in modern times, the people who practice them, and the way these practices can offer people healing, catharsis, joy, laughter, coping mechanisms, a way to see what the body is capable of, the way people might deal with chronic pain or body image issues or self-confidence issues or relationship issues or work or life issues through this practice. And the way that modern facilitators are trying to perform this safely, whether it's a look at the technical side of things and how we ensure that things are clean and safe and stable, or a look at the spiritual and emotional side of things and the way the community shows up for suspendees, the way it honors the past, and the way it tries to move forward, always growing and always learning. Beyond Pain is a beautiful depiction of what modern suspension is, and I hope it is a resource that therapists and doctors and future anthropologists can use to have a more open-minded perspective of this practice that so many of us find near and dear. If you can get your hands on a physical copy of this, it is an incredible, incredible read. I don't blame you if you can't. It is not easy to find, but it is a worthwhile piece to have in your collection if you're someone who's passionate about suspension or body modification. And Frederica, a heartfelt thanks for seeing our community so fully and for listening and to opening your heart to us and our way of life. This was such a good one. I'm so excited. Also, thank you all for the book reviews you've been leaving on my book as well. Partially thank you, partially rude of you. I really made such a huge dent on my TBR pile when I was recovering from top surgery, which is now almost a year ago, which is wild to think about. My TBR pile was like this big. I had like 4 or 5 books in it. I was so close to clearing it. And I really didn't think people liked the book review series. I thought a lot of folks thought it was boring, but people apparently really like it. Y'all have been suggesting me some incredible books. My TBR pile is huge again. I've got like 17 books in the queue just waiting to be read that are either directly related to tattoo and piercing and body modification and suspension, or indirectly related to things that affect the industry like gemstones and jewelry or legal policies, or conceptual theory craft that affects what we do. I'm so excited to keep reading all of these books. I am so excited for all of your suggestions, and I can't wait to sit down and let you know all about the next one. Have a great rest of your day, and I'm sure we'll chat again next week. Bye.